بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف وجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره إن شاء الله. We talked about the principle of prophethood, and we said this is to be considered as a very important law in the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides His creation with guidance. And prophethood is one form of guidance, which is sometimes called legislative guidance. But we have also a much broader type of guidance, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides everything in this world, even non-human beings, even non-animals, with some type of guidance so that they know what to do and how to achieve perfection. Could you please come forward so people can sit? Salawat. And we mentioned two verses of the Quran in this regard. One is the answer of Prophet Musa to Pharaoh when Pharaoh asked him, "Who is your Lord, Musa and Harun?" And they said, of course, one of them replied, but on behalf of both, رَبُّنَا الَّذِي أَعْطَى كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلْقَهُ ثُمَّ هَدَى. Our Lord is the one that has given everything its creation and then its guidance. And also in Surah A'la, الَّذِي خَلَقَ فَسَوَّى وَالَّذِي قَدَّرَ فَهَدَى. Then we said, when it comes to the prophethood or sending revelation, which is specific to some creation, it's for human beings and also for jinns, because jinns also benefit from the revelation which come to human beings. And some scholars like Ayatollah Mutahhari, they believe that jinns didn't have prophets of their own, because their capacity for receiving revelation is not enough, so they follow human prophets. So we have today jinns who are Muslims, and they follow the Prophet of Islam, and also previously. Because jinns also share with us freedom, so they need further guidance through the prophets. So prophets are sent to guide human beings and jinns, at least these two. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created jinns or human beings except to worship me. And the way to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is presented by the prophets. Okay. Then we said that there are some discussions about prophethood which relates to all prophets, and this is what we call an-nubuwwatul amma, general prophethood. And there are some discussions which relate to the Prophet of Islam sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In other words, to be a Muslim, you need to believe first that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the history has sent some prophets for guiding people. And second, you must believe who is the prophet that we are supposed to follow in our time. So if I believe that Allah has sent all the prophets, 124,000 prophets, if I believe that, but I have doubt about only who was the last one, Was it Prophet Muhammad or someone else, or he has not yet come? So this is not accepted. This is not sufficient. Even if you believe that there were many, many prophets, you mentioned them by name as far as we know, but you have doubt about the name or the personality of the last one, which relates to our age. This is not accepted. So we must accept, we must believe in the prophethood in general, and also we must know who is the prophet of Allah that we should follow. Of course, we believe in all the prophets. We confirm their prophecies. La نفرق بين أحد من رسله. We don't discriminate against any prophet, but we should know who is the final messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inshallah today, my plan is I will talk about the idea of final prophethood. So, regarding the general concept of prophethood, which is something related to all the prophets, we believe in several things. First, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides his prophets with some clear signs, with some proofs, with some bayanat, as the Quran calls, means clear signs. Why? Because people, to be able to wholeheartedly follow someone, to be able to commit themselves to the teachings of someone, they need to be sure that this person is a true messenger of God. Because as you know, there have been people who have claimed to be prophets, but they were not prophets. Even after the Prophet of Islam, we had people who claimed to be prophet. Even today, you know, we have people who follow some other people who have said that we are prophets and we have come after the Prophet of Islam, and they have formed some kind of religions or, you know, pseudo-religions in Iran, in subcontinent. We have all these types of, you know, people. After the Prophet of Islam, there were some people who tried to say that we believe in Islam, but we have doubt about that the Prophet was the final prophet. And they try to play with the verses of the Quran and Hadith. We suggest that he was the final prophet so that they can create some space for themselves. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always provides his prophets, his true prophets, with some bayanat, with some clear signs that leaves no doubt that this person is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are those bayanat? Those bayanat, those clear proofs vary according to the time, according to the age, according to the understanding of people. For example, according to some hadiths, in the time of Prophet Musa ala nabiyina wa alayhi salam, when people considered magic as the highest skill and the highest technique that human beings can achieve, and magicians were very important, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided Musa with some kind of miracle which was much more greater than what all magicians together could do. And the people who were appreciating magic, they realized that, oh, this cannot be work of a human being. And interestingly, the Quran says the magicians were the first to believe in Musa. Why? Because they were experts in the field. They knew that this cannot be done by a human being. Like, for example, if today someone, for example, suffers from cancer, and then there is no solution, no treatment, and he is miraculously healed, overnight he or she is healed. Doctors, medical doctors would be the first people to admit that this cannot be something accidental. Why? Because they know all the things. We may think that maybe something has happened, but medical doctors know that what is the limit of medicine and what is beyond that. And as we say in Farsi, we say قدر زر زرگر شناسد. The person who sells jewelries, he knows the value of jewelry. Normal people may not know what is the value. So when the Prophet Musa wanted to present his miracle, so asked the magicians who were brought by Pharaoh, and Pharaoh had promised them that if you would defeat Musa, you would be very close to me. And I will give you a very important position. So the Prophet Musa said, would you want to start or you want me to start? And when he threw his stick and became a dragon, then those magicians, they were the first to declare that this cannot be except from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And not only that, they were changed. They had a real conversion. When Pharaoh told them that I'm going to punish you in a very severe way, لَأُصَلِّبَنَّكُمْ فِي جُزُوءِ النَّخْلِ أَجْمَعِينَ, I will crucify you. I will crucify you and kill you severely. They said, لَا ضَيْرَ إِنَّا إِلَىٰ رَبِّنَا لَمُنْغَلِبُونَ. There is no problem. We all have turned and converted or reverted to our Lord. This shows the power of miracle of Musa, that magicians who have spent all their lives on doing magic and earning and eating from the money which is coming from haram, but they had this fairness. When they saw this, they were so much changed that they said, we are going to die. We don't deny that Musa is from God. In the time of Prophet Isa, the most important thing was medicine. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided Isa with something that the people, especially the doctors, the physicians, realized that this cannot be from a human being. He was able to heal the people who was not possible to be treated. Someone who was blind, someone who had severe illness in, for example, their skins. Even he was able to revive the dead. So this was the miracle which Allah gave to the Prophet Isa. When it comes to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, although Allah provided him with miracles like this, like for example, the Shaqqul Qamar, when the moon was split and the people saw that, or other miracles. But the most important miracle of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the Quran, for the same reason and for an extra reason. The same reason is that in that time, the most important thing was rhetoric and was the ability to communicate, especially in a poetic form. Poets had very high position, and there were 7 pieces of poem which were put and hung in Kaaba. It's called Mu'allaqat al-Sab'a. And they were so important that they hang them in Kaaba, on the wall of Kaaba. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided his prophet with some words, with a kind of miracle which is based on language. And those people who were very eloquent, Arabs at that time were in the peak of eloquence. They were the first people to admit that this cannot be word of a human being. And they were so much impressed by the Quran that even those who opposed the Quran and opposed the Prophet could not stop listening to the Quran and enjoying the Quran. And this is why they were advising each other that you must not listen to the Quran, otherwise people would lose their trust in us and they will believe in Muhammad. So they were asking people to put cotton in their ears so that they don't listen to Muhammad reciting the Quran. And in the night, they were going and hiding themselves behind the house of the Prophet and listening to the Quran. And you may have heard the story that once in the morning or just after dawn when it was getting bright, 3 leaders of Quraysh met each other. And they asked each other, where were you? They said, we were waiting behind the house of Muhammad and listening to him. And they said, but we promise that we don't come again, because if people realize that we come and listen to him, then no one would trust us. So they promised each other, and then the next day again they saw each other, because everyone thought that the others are not coming. And then again they promised. The third night again they saw each other, and then they made very strong, promises and vows that we don't come. So they couldn't stop listening to the Quran. So what they did, they didn't say that there is something wrong in the Quran. They didn't say that Quran is not eloquent. They said, this is sihr. In haza illa sihrun mubin. They said, we don't know why this word is so much powerful that we cannot stop listening to it. So Muhammad must have done some sihr. This was to disqualify the Quran, but this was not sihr. You cannot do magic for billions or millions of people. You can do magic for 1 person or 2 people, but you cannot do sihr for many people. Sometimes they said that he is taught by other people. But this was also ridiculous. Who was there who had such an ability to give these words to the Prophet and then don't claim such a position for himself? And who was else available? And where did the Prophet go for a study? There was no record of Prophet going anywhere for a study. And indeed, he was not reading or writing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided him with a miracle which was related to that time. But there is also extra reason. It's not just that. The extra reason is that the miracle of the Prophet, the Quran, I mean, the main one, is unique in the sense that it is available for all generations to come. The miracles of Prophet Musa is not available today for Jewish community. They just read it in the history. Or for example, the miracles of Jesus they are not available today. But the miracle of Prophet Muhammad is available today. And we believe that up to the end of the time will be available. And Allah has promised that He will protect Quran. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. So all people, all the generations to come would be able to witness the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because this religion is supposed to remain forever. This is the final message of Allah. And the Prophet was the final prophet. So his miracle must be preserved. We believe that even today, still the Quranic challenge is in effect. If you don't believe that the Quran is word of God, in the same way that the Arabs at that time were challenged to bring something like Quran, people also today are challenged. if they can produce anything like the Quran, welcome. Bismillah. Bring something like the Quran, and then we leave Quran aside. If you can bring something not better than the Quran, just like the Quran, not like the whole Quran, like one chapter of the Quran. And this is a very also scientific method. There is a discussion in philosophy of science that what is the requirement for something being scientific. Because, you know, it's a very long discussion about how something can be proved in science, and then it has become very complicated. So they said, let's forget that we can prove something, but at least we must have something as a requirement, as a criterion to say that whether something is scientific or not. And the idea of many philosophers of religion, especially this was put forward by Popper, was if something can be falsified, then that is a scientific claim. If something can be falsified. If you say something that I cannot falsify, for example, if you say that around the moon there is a kind of shelter made from glass, which is not visible and which does not reflect anything, any light, any wave, I cannot understand whether this is true or not. I cannot prove it, I cannot reject it. So they say this is not a scientific claim, because a scientific claim must be able to be shown that this is false. If you say something which there is no way to falsify that, this is not scientific. Okay? Like, you know, they say that once Mullah Nasruddin, I don't know if you know Mullah Nasruddin, he was very humorous. He was asked, where is the center of the world? And he said, that's where I have put the nail inside the ground. They said, how do you prove it? He said, this is clear fact. If you don't accept, go and measure. All over the world, you find that this is the center of the world. Okay, so you can claim something like this, but if it cannot be falsified, so this is not a scientific claim. Of course, it was possible technically to be falsified, but maybe not for the people of that time. So, the Quran not only says that this is word of God, but also gives you something to falsify the Quran. This is a very important point. I don't have time to go into details. Just quickly I want to pass. The Quran says, if you don't believe in me, I myself show you a way to reject me. If you don't believe that I am from God, I show you some way to falsify me. How? First, I give you some news about future. If those don't happen, I am rejected, I am falsified. You know, like for example, the Quran informed about the victory of the Romans in near future. In near future, not in the long-term future. Fi bez'a sanin. So in a matter of few years, which is bez means between 3 and 9, 10, the Romans will be victorious. So if it didn't happen, then the Quran was falsified. And something forever, the Quran says, whoever can bring something like the Quran, I am automatically disqualified. So the Quran not only is falsified, the Quran itself shows how to falsify it. And no one has been able to do this. So this miracle is a special miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is always available. And we must be very thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us the Quran. This is something that we can never really understand, how important it is to have something that you know that from the beginning up to the end is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, without any alteration, without any addition or deletion. There is a technical discussion about the definition of miracle. I say it quickly so that we can talk about then Isma. Our ulama have defined miracle as this. They say any extraordinary act which is performed by someone who claims to be a prophet and is accompanied by challenge. So there are three requirements. It must be extraordinary, something that people cannot do it by learning, by practice. At the same time, it must be performed by someone who claims to be a prophet. So if, for example, it is some extraordinary act performed by imams, this is not mu'jiza. We don't call it mu'jiza. We call it karama. Mu'jiza is only for the prophets. Or if, you know, some people who are not even pious, sometimes they do extraordinary acts. But when they don't claim to be prophet, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may let them do. But if someone claims to be a prophet, Allah never let him to do something extraordinary so that people would be deceived. This is a very important argument here. They refer to the principle of divine grace or qa'idiyya lutf. They say it's possible that Allah may allow someone, like for example a mystic or some ascetic, or you know, some people who have, you know, devoted all their life on spiritual exercises. They may do something extraordinary. But as soon as they want to claim that this is given to us by God, so you must follow us, we are sent by God, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would interfere. Allah do not let any person to deceive others. And also it must be accompanied with challenge. What does it mean? Tahaddi. It means that that person must be able to challenge all humanity and say, no one can do what I do. In most of the cases, even if you see extraordinary things, it's not really extraordinary. You can go and sit with them and learn. They train students. It's not really extraordinary. They cannot challenge. They cannot say, what I do, no one can do. But what the prophets were doing is much higher. It was extraordinary in the real sense, in the full sense, so that they could say, without any hesitation, that I challenge all humanity, even all jinns, to help each other, to support each other, but still they cannot bring something like this. So this is the definition, technical definition of miracle. Then the other point which we should discuss today is Isma, infallibility. We talked a little bit about this in the previous session, but I promised to bring the arguments. I said just I say a little bit. In the next session we will talk about it more. This is also something that we believe to be a requirement for all prophets. It's not only about Prophet of Islam. We believe that all the prophets were infallible, or as some people translate, immune from committing sins or mistakes. Here there is a difference between Muslims. All Muslims, to certain limit, accept Isma or infallibility to certain extent. But To what extent there is a difference? Normally, our Sunni brothers and sisters, they accept Isma in respect to those things which are related to the mission of the prophets, to their tabligh. For example, they say prophets never make mistake or never tell lies about what has been revealed to them. In their understanding of revelation, in their presentation of revelation, they don't make mistakes, they don't commit sins. But some of our Sunni brothers, they say that they may make mistakes in their personal life. Even some of them say they may commit sins in their personal life. And most of them, they say the prophets were not ma'soom before they became prophet. For example, here in this book I have quoted from some Sunni scholars. For example, the Ash'arites, they believed that the prophets don't commit intentional sins. Okay? Whether minor or major. But the prophets may commit sins unintentionally. Sometimes, they may not be careful, they may tell lies. Not intentionally, but unintentionally they may tell lies. Or unintentionally they may drink wine. Unintentionally they may hit someone out of injustice. As long as it's unintentional, there is no problem. The Mu'tazilites, who is another group of the Sunni theologians, they had the idea that the prophets are infallible in respect to major sins. Gunahane kabire, major sins. They don't commit major sins, whether intentional or unintentional. But they may commit minor sins, even intentionally. Okay? This is their idea. A very important book in theology, especially about different ideas of Muslim sects, is a book called Al-Farq Bayn al-Firaq. Al-Farq Bayn al-Firaq means the difference between Muslim sects. This is by a person called Al-Baghdadi. In his book, page 343, in the edition that I have used, he says about Sunni Muslims, he said they believe in the infallibility of the prophets in relation to sins. Of course, with differences which I mentioned. They have construed what is narrated about their lapses as having occurred before their prophethood. So if they have done something sinful, it's because it was before their prophethood. So before they become prophet, they may have committed some sins. Okay? This is their understanding. What is our understanding is different. For example, Allama Halli, rahmatullah alayhi, one of our great scholars, not only in fiqh, but also in theology, he says, truly the prophets are infallible from the beginning of their lives till the end. And then he brings the argument. Because the hearts of the people do not tend to obey those whom they have witnessed previously committing different types of minor or major sins or hateful acts. Inshallah, I will explain the argument later. So for us, it's very straightforward that we reject any kind of sin. If I want to classify, I can say there are three types of sins. Sins performed after they become prophet. This is something that normally Muslims reject. Of course, some say if it is unintentional, no problem, or it's minor, no problem. But more or less they accept. This is the easiest part of the argument. That if a prophet commits sins after he becomes a prophet, this means that all his mission will be questioned. How someone claims that I receive direct communication from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I am presenting you with the way that brings happiness and perfection for you, and then he himself disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and doesn't observe the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It makes no sense at all. The whole benefit of sending a message is lost if the person who has brought this message himself is not committed. And don't forget that we said the prophets have great role not only in teaching but also in being a role model. It's not just like teaching mathematics. You can learn mathematics from someone who is a very wicked person. But you cannot learn piety and how to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from someone who is sinful. So this is not very difficult, that the prophets will not commit sins, do not commit sins after they become prophets. Not only in respect to their tabligh, not only they don't commit sins in respect to teaching the wahy, the revelation, but also in their personal life. Is it possible that you say this distinction is not making sense? To say that, okay, when the prophet was reading the Quran, he was not making mistake. But maybe when the prophet was speaking to the people, he may have forgotten their names, he may have forgotten the address of his home. You know, do these mistakes. I'm not even saying sins, even mistakes. If the prophets make mistakes in their life, then people would not trust them. This is a very simple idea. People do not trust someone who cannot manage his own life without mistakes and then says, you know, I have brought you a message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I lose my home and I don't know how to get to my home, then do you trust me that I am showing you the way of heaven? I'm showing you the way to Jannah? No one would listen to me. So, when they become prophets, whether it's a matter of tabligh or a matter of their personal life, they must be ma'soom. Otherwise, no one would listen to them, no one would trust them. No one would be able to offer his life to what you say if they see that you commit sins yourself or you make mistakes. You know, the prophet, for example, look at the prophet of Islam. He was not leading a small community. Sometimes it's possible to convince, even if you are not ma'soom, to convince a small community or a large community in a time. But to be able to attract billions of people in all centuries to come, and people be so much committed to your message that they are ready to offer their money, their life, their children, everything. This is not possible if people think that you may have committed sins yourself. Even just they think, even if they don't see you are committing sins, that they think that you were maybe mistaken. So this is very clear. What about the period before they became prophet? Maybe some people say, oh, you Shia, you are very, extremist. Why you say even before they became prophet, they were not committing sins? The reason is again clear. If up to yesterday, na'uzu billah, God forbid, the Prophet of Islam was like any Arab in the Mecca, na'uzu billah, committing all those sins, and then today he comes and says, I am a new person. I have brought you a message, and from today you will not see me committing any sin. Would people trust him? How is it possible? The people who, indeed, quite opposite, the people who knew that the Prophet was not like them, the people who knew that he is Amin, he has never betrayed anyone, he has never broken his promises, he has never told any lies, still they didn't believe. And they tried to find some excuses. Although they knew that he was different. Really, even before the Prophet became prophet, he was a special person. And you remember the story of putting Hajarul Aswad back in its place. That how they became happy when they saw he has come inside Masjid al-Haram. So the Prophet, despite all the piety that he had, still the people who were not really seeking truth, they didn't believe in him. How it comes that a person is a person like any other person, committing all the crimes and sins and mistakes, and then all of a sudden he changes and the people believe in him? This is impossible. More important than this is something else. That indeed, the people who think that prophets may commit sins and then still become prophets, they have not really understood what does prophethood mean. To be a prophet is not like to be appointed as a minister or as a, for example, boss or as a manager. Sometimes, there are 10 people working in the same office. They are more or less the same. You can appoint one of them as the boss. Even if you appoint who is the least qualified, still it may work. You can do this. Many people do this in the world. It's not that always the best people are appointed. But to be able to receive direct, this is very important, direct communication from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This needs a very great heart. A heart with great capacity. Because the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the highest manifestation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifested a little bit to the mount. When Musa asked to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, said, Rabbi arni anzur ilayk. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Lan tarani ya Musa, you will not see me. Lakin anzur ila al-jabal. Look at the mount. فَإِنْ اسْتَقَرَّ مَكَانَهُ فَسَوْفَ تَرَانِي. If the mount can be stable, you can see me. فَلَمَّا تَجَلَّى رَبُّهُ لِلْجَبَلِ جَعَلَهُ دَكَّا وَخَرَّ مُوسَى صَعِقًا. When Allah manifested to the mount was made into pieces. And Musa fell down. So even a mount cannot tolerate this. To be able to receive divine word, which is very heavy, very weighty. إِنَّا سَنُلْقِي عَلَيْكَ قَوْلًا ثَقِيلًا. We reveal to you a heavy word, weighty word. This needs capacity. Even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was receiving the revelation, he had some difficult time. It was not easy. He was sometimes, starting to, what you call sweat, sweating. Sometimes, if he was riding, for example, a horse or, for example, a camel, he became so heavy that the back of the camel was going down. It was very difficult, even for the Prophet. It's like if you connect some electricity to someone. It's very difficult. And the Prophet had greatest heart, according to a hadith from Ma'soom alayhi salam, Imam alayhi salam. He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the Prophet Muhammad because he had the greatest heart. And this is why Allah sent him the message. Even the prophets, according to their levels, they were different in receiving the message. It's not that always they saw Jibreel and Jibreel brought them a message. Sometimes they just heard the voice from a bush or a tree. Sometimes they just heard the voice from behind something. مَا كَانَ لِبَشَرٍ أَنْ يُكَلِّمَهُ اللَّهُ. Allah says that it's not possible for a person to be spoken by Allah except there are three ways. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yursalu ilayhi rasula. Allah sends a messenger, means an angel. Sometimes min wara'i hijab, from behind something, some well, he hears the voice. Sometimes Allah puts into his heart. There are different ways according to the capacity of the prophets, according to that time, how ready they are. So, to think that it's possible to have a sinful life and then become a prophet, even if people trust you. Of course, I said people will never trust you, but even if people trust you, it's impossible. You need to have pious life. You have to have devotion so that you can be chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when a person becomes a prophet, it must be after hard work. It's not something which can be given, just as a gift without, any condition. No, that person must be prepared. That person must be qualified. And the only one who knows that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because we only know a little bit about the people. We cannot really know people because our knowledge of the heart, of the spirit of the people is very limited. We just only see their acts. In not all the times, of course, sometimes. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who knows who is really pious always and in all circumstances, and he is persistent and consistent. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu a'lamu haysu yaj'alu risalata. Allah knows the best where to put his mission. So, Isma, according to the Shia theology, is something which is covering both before and after someone becomes prophet in respect to sins and mistakes, intentional or unintentional. Now, the question is, what is the nature of Isma? How someone is protected from sin? I would like to refer to what one of our great ulama, just 3 minutes, what one of our great ulama have said, to show you that this is not something new. This is something that we have always been saying. One of our great ulama is Khaja Nasiruddin Tusi. He's a great alim. And Ismailis claim that he was Ismaili. If he was Ismaili, we have no problem, So, he is a great alim, and he was the one who was able to reconcile between kalam and philosophy. And he has a very great work, and that is Tajreed, which is commented by many people, Sunni and Shia, as a very important textbook. And he has other books. One of his books is called Talkhisul Muhassal. He says, this is in Talkhisul Muhassal, page 525. He says, Isma, infallibility, is when the servant, means abd, the servant of Allah, is able to perform sins, but he does not wish to do so at all. And this lack of will for committing sins, or the existence of something that prevents him from that, is a divine grace for him. So he does not disobey God, not because he is unable to do so, but because he does not will to do so. Okay, this is what he says. What does it mean? It means that the prophets were human beings. They could have committed sins. Even they had desires like us. It was not that the prophet didn't have desire for simple life, they didn't have desire, for example, for material pleasures. They had all this. But they had such a great piety, such a great understanding, that they were never thinking of disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only they were not disobeying Allah in the conventional sense, even for them just negligence, just not to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was a big crime. This is why you see, for example, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that every day I ask forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, إِنَّهُ لَيُغَانُ عَلَى غَلْبِي, I feel my heart is smoked, as it's clouded. Not because of anything other than just getting involved in the life and speaking to the people. So he finds this like a sin. Or you read these du'as of Du'a Abu Hamza or Du'a Arafah, Du'a Kumail, when imams ask for forgiveness. Why? Because they so much understand the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they so much have love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they think if they spend a moment, a second of their life without showing their love to Allah and devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a big sin. So this is the reason that why they didn't commit sins. You may ask, is there any example that can help us? You say yes. Even we ourselves are ma'soom in respect to some things. For example, one of the sins is to drink or eat blood. This is haram. Is any one of us who may have even thought about drinking blood? No. Why? Because we understand that how ugly and how unpleasant is this. So we never do this. Even if Islam, didn't want us, we didn't. Or for example, to go to the street while we don't have any dress, nakedly. We never commit such sin. Why? Because we understand the ugliness of this. We never go on the roof and throw ourselves, and commit suicide. Most of us never do this, Maybe just 1 in a million of people commit suicide when they have some disturbed mind. Otherwise, we are all protected from this. Why? We cannot do this. We cannot commit suicide. We can. All of you can commit suicide. Why you don't commit suicide? Why you don't drink najas? Why you don't go to a street naked? Because we know that how ugly is this. We never even tempt to do this. We don't have temptation. For the prophets, all the sins are like this. They understand the ugliness of sins so obviously that Even if you force them to commit sin, they will not do. It's like forcing someone, if you force someone, if you bribe someone, give lots of money to someone to go to a street naked. If it's a normal person, if it's a pious person, they will go, even if you give him lots of money. For the prophets, this was the case. So, their protection was most of all because of their piety and understanding. Understanding is very important. And of course, in respect to mistakes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives extra support. If someone doesn't commit sins, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects him from mistakes so that this person can be fully trusted by people. Okay? So, there is some divine grace here so that that person even unintentionally makes mistakes. But the main factor is the person himself. So, he does his best not to commit any sin, not to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala facilitates this for him and protects him even from mistakes. Inshallah, in the next session, I will talk about the issue of Khatm al-Nubuwwat, the seal of prophethood. That how is it possible to have revelation which can endure for all the generations. Inshallah, we'll talk about this and then we start Imamah. Thank you very much for your attention. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
It's now namaz time. I think they're going to do adhan just now. So inshallah, if we make our way downstairs to the main hall, Jazakallah.